Good day, good morning, good evening, and good night. This is Dan Miller, Dr. Dan Miller. You're on the 250 River with Dr. Dan. Welcome to episode 16. That's 1-6. It's hard to believe. We're almost wrapping up the month of February 2025. We'll be looking at 250 years ago this week-ish kind of thing based on my Americanism Redux entry for February 20th. Of 1775 on the 250 River with Dr. Dan. And yes, today it's top five. We're doing the top five from that week, 250 years ago. Let's see who makes the list, and let's see the order in which the list is dispensed here. So we're going to start with number five in just 1 second. I want to thank this week's advertiser, 99% fact, 1% fiction. There is the real, 250 years ago, the real Johann Christian Oetter. If you live in the greater Philadelphia area in the colony of Pennsylvania 250 years ago right now, I recommend you find a way to get up to Mr. Oetter's shop and home 60 miles away from Pennsylvania or from Philadelphia in Bucks County. You need to get to Mr. Oetter as soon as you can because he is the premier gunsmith in all of the central colonial world there in the Delaware River Valley. There's none better, and he may be number one when you talk about the entire colonial world up and down the Atlantic coast. Here's the deal. He's a Moravian, a German immigrant, so he will talk like this when you see him, when you come and do the business with Mr. Oetter. Here's what you're going to ask him to do. Please, can you put me on your list to make a rifle? Handmade, beautiful piece of artistry, beautiful piece of craftsmanship, but that's probably not why you're going to be doing this, because you want the latest, greatest, and best type of rifle that can be made. That's the kind of rifle that's got the rifling groove, the kind of gun barrel. It's got the rifling grooving, spiral grooving inside the barrel. There's a very small cone-shaped bullet that goes in and then spins out like a football thrown with a perfect spiral. Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, and whoever else, certainly no one for the Colts, can do that. But everybody else can. That perfect spiral. A spiraled rifle bullet can hit its mark in the hands of a skilled rifleman, can hit its mark 250 to 300 yards away. That is insanely accurate, insanely long range in terms of that, when most of the rest of the world operates with smooth bore muskets that can spew out a round musket ball that might make it 60 yards and then kind of fall flat. So get to Johann Christian Oetter, Bucks County, Pennsylvania. Get on his list. It takes him about a week to make these things. He's a meticulous craftsperson, as I said, just without parallel. So thank you to Johann Christian Oetter for the sponsorship of this week's on the 250 River with Dr. Dan. So let's go to number five. We are at number five, 250 years ago today. And then we're going to start off with 3,000 people. 3,000 people in the community, the greater community of Boston, colony of Massachusetts. That's the latest number that we've got this week. 1 out of every 5 people is surviving from meal to meal, day to day. The food rations are down to nothing or next to nothing, and 3,000 out of the 15,000 people who live in Boston at this point are on the verge, certainly in the midst of severe hunger, somewhat on the verge of starvation. They can barely make it breakfast, dinner, supper, meal to meal to meal. The reason is because of the Boston Port Act that Parliament has stamped on, forced on the colony of Massachusetts. It has closed the Port of Boston. All economic activity coming in and out shut down until there is payment made for the tea spilled last year in late 1773, more than a year ago now. So it's tough times. So as I said, one out of every 5 Bostonian is in a bad way and relying on donated food that the churches have brought in, other colonies, other communities have sent in. It's a very dicey situation there in Boston. So, and if you're wondering who are those 3,000 people, I think common sense tells us something. Common sense tells us that the people who prior to this, the poor people who might have been going week to week in the normal course of their lives, are now down to day, meal to meal. So it hits the poorest of the poor the hardest and first and longest. So they're number 5 on our top 5 for 250 years ago today. Number 4, we have a member of the Provincial Congress. That's the revolutionary government that's operating in Massachusetts. They shut down the government as it normally exists too, as punishment. So there was this kind of sprouting up of a revolutionary alternative for people to have as their government. Joseph Warren is on our number 4 spot. Yes, graphics number 4 spot today. He's a member of that provincial assembly. He's a rebel leader. He's a protest leader, and has been all along. He says that today, 250 years ago, it's his prediction that if the British general Thomas Gage, the Redcoat General Thomas Gage, who's now the military governor, that was taken away too, the military governor of Massachusetts, if he sends a military armed force, an armed expedition into the countryside, biggest mistake ever, because you're going to lose New England right there. And by lose, he means New England will separate, break off, boom, right now. Resist right now. Bloodshed right now. If he does that, Warren goes another step and says, I'm sure that's going to happen as far as New England's concerned, and it may be, quote, all of America too, close quote. So big prediction from Joseph Warren, and he's pretty confident that if or when, and he kind of thinks when that happens now, it's whatever day it is, whatever week it's going to be, it's going to happen. Makes me think he's got some insider information, honestly, from somebody on Gage's staff or someone married to someone on Gage's staff. Warren says if or when this comes to pass, then New England is out of the empire, and probably all of America is out of the empire. And remember, he's part of a provincial Congress that's ready to go, already passing laws and making pronouncements on a day-to-day basis, including trying to care for those 3,000 people. So our number 4, Joseph Warren. Our number 3 on the top 5, Adam Stephen. Now we leave the colony of Massachusetts, we go down south to the colony of Virginia, actually a little west in the colony of Virginia. Adam Stephen is a colonel in the Virginia militia. He was one of the volunteers, one of the officer volunteers who participated in the military expedition that went west with Lord Dunmore, the governor, and they took some native land, had a battle at a place called Point Pleasant on the Ohio River, where the Ohio and the Great Kanawha Rivers converge. The Virginia Force won. They run the local native tribe out, kill several natives in the process, and take their land as the conclusion. Adam Stephen led a group of Virginia men in that expedition. Many of those, and so we'll get to the many in just a second. So Stephen is saying to the Virginia Assembly, you have got to pay these guys what they're owed. These guys must be paid. They were promised some payment. Cut a check, set aside the funds, whatever it is you're going to do it, get the money to them. That's what they deserve, and it's what we owe them, and it's what you, as this colony's political leadership, that's what you owe them, and you promised to pay. And then in the note that he's writing to the assembly, urging this, little kind of parenthetical statement, because you never know. You never know how valuable guys like this could be, because many of these guys are very skilled in warfare. Many of these guys are very experienced in taking what they do on a daily basis, which is hunting and trapping and fishing and tracking, and just kind of doing a little dual use into warfare, and you never know when that's going to be handy. Now, I don't know about you. There's a little bit of a kind of a potential there. They'll help us out if the worst comes to worst, if blood comes to blood with the crisis against England. A little bit of a threat there too, I think. But lastly, for number 3 in Adam Stephen, a lot of those guys are riflemen. So we're back to Johann Christian Erter and his handmade rifles. And there's a number of those guys who have his rifles or other people's versions of those rifles, and they become quite adept at them. And in the Redux, I compared them to almost to drones, because there's something new, something different, something unconventional. There aren't rules, and they're just kind of going how they want to go with this. And so the guys that are skilled with it, they'll do what they want in many, many cases, and they might be a little harder to control than we're used to. But that's embedded in the petition that Adam Stephen writes to the Provincial Assembly in Virginia. Number two. Check our time, we're fine. Number 2 of our top 5, Lord North. Lord North is the Prime Minister in Parliament, the Prime Minister of George III's government in Parliament. Lord North is, he's a hard hitter. Doesn't look like it if you ever see a painting of him, a drawing of him. He looks pretty soft and malleable in that regard, but he's really not as a Prime Minister. He's very pro-Britain, very pro-empire, very pro-imperial rights, power, authority. So, as far as Boston's concerned, as far as any colonial resistance or protest is concerned, don't come to him. He doesn't care. He's fully in support of the punishment that's being exerted now on Boston and Massachusetts that's resulting, among other things, in our 3,000 people lacking food. But it's not a 180. It's kind of a 90-degree turn here. Lord North this week offers a conciliatory speech on the floor of the House of Commons 250 years ago, and it gets him to spot number 2 in our top 5. Yes, that's right. I said spot number 2. The conciliatory speech says this: well, colonists, upset colonists, honked off colonists, well, how about this? How about you agree, colony by colony, to pay 2 things: a fair share of the military defense that adds to our bill as your imperial government, and the cost of local government and local governing and governance in your colony. You pay those 2 things, and we forget what's happened. Conciliatory speech from Lord North. You pay your share of the military cost. You pay your local government and the things that it has to have to run on a day-to-day basis. We're square. That's the conciliatory speech, the conciliatory proposal and offer put onto the table of House of Commons in Parliament this past week, 250 years ago. Now, number 1. Uno, numero. Number 1 of our top 5, 250 years ago this week on the 250 River with Dr. Dan. You may think this is weird. Fine. I'm going to give the top spot to Anne Davies. Anne Davies. Her husband is Henry. Her father-in-law, Henry's dad, is Nicholas. The Davies family is advertising in the Virginia newspaper. They live in Virginia, the colony of Virginia. They're advertising in that newspaper, we are starting a new town. We've got the land. It's on the James River. It's further inland, further east into the interior of the colony of Virginia in the county of Amherst, and we've got the town name. It's going to be called Bethel. And we're looking for worthy people to join us in our new town. This is Anne Davies and her family. Stake in the ground. Brand new start, brand new town, brand new life. We're looking for skilled workers. People who can make barrels, people who can fix wagon wheels, people who can make bridles, people who we're looking for skilled workers. Come on out and join us. You can rent land from us. You can buy land from us. You're going to have access to a lot of great stuff. Water transportation, water power. There's existing trade networks that we can get you connected to, so you're paying good, reasonable prices for the necessities of life, food, and all the rest. If you want to get in our factory that we're going to make, we're going to have a brewery there. We're going to make rope there. We're just going to make stuff in this factory. So if you're interested in that, come on out, man. Come on out. Love to have you in our new community of Bethel. This is number one. Why is this number one? Here's why. Give me a sec. This is number one because when you think about it, this has been going on ever since various European great powers have sent settlements and colonizers and crazy expeditions to the New World, as it was called after Columbus dubbed it such. They've been trying this kind of thing ever since the ever since the late 16th century. In the same kind of area, a little further closer to the coast, it was called Roanoke. Year after year, decade after decade, generation after generation, some of them were schemes, some of them were solid, some of them were in between, trying to get people to come here and start in these communities. And of course, they've brought, in some cases, enslaved people with them. They've hauled in enslaved people as well. So, my goodness, here we are. We've got all the other four here in our top five, and then right at the top we've got Ann Davies, husband Henry Davies, father-in-law Nicholas Davies, this perennial, let's just call it their version of the American dream. Yet again, chapter 5,000 by this point in time, also happening at the same time that we have these other four items that are part of the colonial imperial crisis 250 years ago this week. Lastly, I'm running a little long, forgive me. I want to leave you though with a mantra of mine that I've developed because of the research I've done and the writing I've done in Americanism Redux. Here it is. 250 years ago, coming up on right now, takes us to the February of 1775. Union first, nation second. There is an American Union that has been created, coalesced, kind of just mushroomed up since the fall of 74, last fall. It's working together, sometimes well, sometimes not certain. But that union is first, well before there's nation that comes along with declarations and things of that sort. Union first, nation second. I find that dreadfully important as we think about who we are and from whence we came. Okay. This is episode 16. I'm Dr. Dan Miller, and I thank you for hanging out with me. Episode 16 on the 250 River with Dr. Dan. I hope you have a great week, and I'll talk to you soon.